now. Cool. Right, we can start it officially now, Ania. So, welcome to all of you, and welcome to Ania. I'm delighted that Ania agreed. We had a little bit of a discussion a while back, and she said, "Oh, I might like to speak," and I said, "Really? That'd be really cool." So I'm absolutely delighted that she's agreed to give a bit of a presentation tonight. It's very relaxed, or I'm at least hoping she's going to find it quite relaxed. But those of you who have been entering the ICM challenge will know Ania is a rather prolific winner of rather a lot of the challenges. So I hope we're going to hear what the secret is behind tonight. But I'm pretty sure we're going to hear more than just that. And I've been working with Ania for a while, so I've seen a lot of her wonderful work that you guys haven't, and I'm really excited that she's going to give you a little bit of a lowdown on how she finds the inspiration, where it comes from, and the processes, that kind of thing. So without further ado, Ania, I am delighted you're here. The floor is yours. Guys, any questions, if you want to just drop them in the chat box. I think there's a chat box. Yeah, there is a chat box. And I will pass them on at the end. It'll be about an hour-ish. So it's not too long. It's not, yeah. So it's not too long. So we'll save questions till afterwards. But I will keep an eye. Okay, it's probably best. Most of you are muted, but if you're not, if you could go on mute, and then nobody will disturb Ania when dogs bark and doorbells ring and stuff like that. So, Ania, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll share my screen. And this means that. Okay, can everybody see my screen comfortably? Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Okay. Let me just adjust the windows here, because I meant to use two screens, but actually I'm using just one, so to make things easy. Okay. So hello everybody. I'd like to thank Charlie for this opportunity, and preparing for this presentation or for this share case, that's the word I wanted to use, was quite interesting and insightful for me, because it allowed me to kind of look back, reflect on the journey so far, because I see photography as a journey. That's the kind of a metaphor that I use, and take stock of what I've done so far, where I'm at now, and then look ahead. So it was a very, very interesting exercise, and I think, Charlie, this should be the beginning of something new, a new venture, maybe. And I would like to share with you what I have discovered while thinking about the stuff I've been doing in the last few years. And well, hopefully inspire you somehow, share with you what I do, what I'm interested in, where I'm coming from, processes that I'm using. And I'm not claiming that my way is the right way. Obviously, there are many different ways, but just I want to share. So I've decided to entitle my talk "Postcards from the Borders," because postcards, as you know, are very short forms of communication, and they combine images and words, and that is something that is close to my heart. And they kind of provide information, fragments of our experiences elsewhere, for example, holiday, and they kind of to me, they encapsulate the essence of the ways in which we interact with those places, for example, what we do there, what we think of, how we make sense of those new places, etc. And borders, well, I'm based in Scotland. I'm not actually based in the borders of the Scottish borders. I'm in Glasgow, but I'm using this word again as a metaphor, and this is probably a metaphor for how I do things and how I actually live, maybe, and see the world, and how I position myself in the world and in relationships with others. And this is how I noticed that this is how I work with photography as well. I often use different methods. I take risks, I'd like to think. I make mistakes. And I allow happy accidents to happen. I think that's quite, I play a lot, I think. And I kind of, I work across different formats and media as well, and methods. And this is what I would like to share. So this is kind of across the boundaries, in between and beyond the boundaries. And I'm kind of a not separate. So the way I see the border is not about separating, let's say, 2 areas or 3 areas, but it's about the intermingling and the interconnection, the collaboration, interaction. And it's not, for me, it's not about the choice, the binary choice, so this or this, but it's about working, making these things work with each other, along each other, and hoping that they will somehow complement each other and enhance each other. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay. But I'm trying, this is how I kind of approach photography and art in general. And borders is also important to me because it reflects my lived experience of an immigrant living across cultures and languages. So English is not my first language. However, I live in an English speaking country and I actually teach English. And I kind of often feel that I don't belong anywhere. So, you know, I've been away from my country for such a long time that, well, it does feel like home. It's not my home. And even though I've been here for a long time and I speak the language quite well, again, there are moments when I don't feel I belong here. And more often, I kind of think that it's the in-betweenness, that space, you know, in between, that's my home in a way. And I kind of, through my choices, I shape that space, and I take from one culture and another culture, from one language and another language, and then it's like a kind of a melting pot. And this is, and I'm telling you all this because this is, I think it kind of underlies or informs the way I approach photography and art. Yeah, so I should probably say a few words about myself, again, just to kind of, because I feel like some of my identities play quite a big part directly or indirectly in my photography. So I'm Polish by origin, I'm an adopted Scot, and by background, I'm a linguist and a language teacher and a teacher trainer. And I specialize in the use of educational technology. I work as a teacher in higher education, and I work with international students at the Glasgow School of Art. I'm not teaching art or anything like this. I teach study skills. But all these bits of information inform my practice, my photographic practice. So, for example, the fact that I do have some background and I have dealings with academia means that I'm quite research-oriented. And you will probably see some of it during this talk. And also the fact that I'm surrounded by artists and designers, and I have conversations with them on a, let's say, sort of regular basis. I'm kind of even though I'm not qualified, I don't have qualifications in art or design, formal qualifications. I am kind of in that environment when I hear people speaking, using certain terms, sharing their understanding of what art is for them, etc. And I feel like that informs my practice. Okay, let me just move this. So I do identify now myself proudly as a photographer, and more often as an artist, even though, as I said, I have no formal qualifications in either. I'm completely self-taught. And what I mean by this is that I learned by experience. So by basically doing, and often I say to people when they ask me, but how did you do this? And I say, well, I just pressed buttons. And seriously, it's often about pressing buttons. And I do get a lot of things wrong. But then, you know, every now and again you get something right, and then you start asking questions. So what did I do? And then you might ask other people questions, and they can give you some advice and suggestions, and this is how you grow. I've done my share of workshops and courses, and I have done courses with Charlie as well. And those courses opened my eyes to different possibilities or helped me formalize certain ways of doing. And that was certainly useful. Now, in terms of the subjects that I photograph, I think these 4 pictures in the slide represent them quite well. So I would say it's trees first and foremost, and probably that's why Charlie and I get on photographically speaking, because I know that she loves trees as well. And it's landscapes, both mountains and sea. And I'm lucky enough to be in Scotland where we've got both. It's plants, flowers as well, but probably grasses and weeds and plants that are maybe, not subjectively speaking, not the most beautiful, but they are often very interesting. And every now and again, I do architecture as well. And then I don't photograph people really. However, I do photograph something that I have, when preparing for this, I decided to refer to as human experiences. So that's the image on the left. And then every now and again, I do self-portraits. And there's a reason for that, and which I will explain later, which will become clear later. In general terms, photography or art provides me with a safe space for play. I think it's the inner child in me that just needs to play, or maybe I didn't get enough play when I was a kid. I like experimenting, so photography gives that to me as well. It certainly gets me out of the house, which is healthy. Okay, I love being in nature, and probably that's the place increasingly more and more often when I really feel like at home. And again, I've got images that somehow build on that, expand on that. When I'm in nature with a camera, I would say in the past, I would often kind of start quite quickly photographing. With time now, I think that process has changed. So I do not necessarily take the camera out and photograph, but I kind of try to get to know the place a little bit and kind of get in sync with the place almost. And again, Charlie, you will remember those little exercises that we did in Holland, and they stayed with me. And so these are kind of like mindfulness exercises where you tune in to what the nature does, using all your senses, not just what you see, but what you hear, what you can touch, what you can smell. And that kind of enhances your interaction with nature. And whether that translates into photography later or not, I don't know, but that's part of my process. I would like to think that this is me then giving back to the nature by just kind of photographing or embodying its beauty. And I try to I try to be, as I said, I try to be mindful, and I try to kind of not to force anything. And so I'm kind of opening to the images, and it might sound quite lofty, but I hope that it resonates with some of you at least. I'm kind of trying to open myself to receive the images. So, the nature starts almost like speaking to me, and then and it has happened to me, strangely enough, that some images, they were like waiting for me to open so that they can offer themselves to me. It was a very weird, almost spiritual experience. So for me, photography, just to summarize, is about slowing down. It's about listening, attending. And this is particularly difficult when we live so fast and, online. I spend a lot of time on screen because of my work, sending emails to my colleagues and my students, and, almost like having to be in several places at the same time. So for me, when I photograph or when I do art, especially outside, but also when I edit and at my desk, it's about, attending. It's about sensing. So that's maybe more to do when that's maybe more when I am outside, connecting to the land, to other creatures, to the nature, to the trees, and then kind of if the photograph comes out and comes out of it, that's a bonus. Okay, it's not the destination. It's an added value. So I have found that in the past I would go, for example, to a park with certain expectations that I would see something and I would photograph that. Now I'm trying to go with intentions. So I'm not expecting anything, but I have intentions, and those intentions are often not that I intend to take 5 photos, but I intend to be open, I intend to relax, I intend to be there for nature in the way that nature is for me. And then last year, in September, I was featured in the ICM photography magazine, and I actually refer to ICM as therapeutic practice because that's how it feels to me. Photography and art, but ICM in particular. And it allows me to process certain emotions and experiences, reframe challenges, grow accepting. So that's where the self-portraits often happen when I'm going through a difficult time. I start photographing myself, trying to find a solution, or just be with that emotion. And I should, maybe one thing more that I would like to say is that I see photography as practice rather than hobby. I used to see it as a hobby, and I never referred to myself as an artist or photographer because I thought, no, I don't have qualifications and I can't. So it has taken me a while to understand that I don't need qualifications, and the fact that it's practice and not a hobby or anything else, that for me that means that I don't separate it from life. So I might have like special times allocated, so like I try to have time during the week that is kind of allocated to photography. So I do like Monday evening editing, for example, or whatever. But the practice, the photography, the practice itself kind of infuses my life almost, and other things that I do in my life often become part of photography and the other way around. So it's about interconnection. And for example, the stuff that I read, and that might be reading for pleasure or reading for work, it's really interesting to see how it often links back to photography in some very bizarre and unexpected ways. I don't know how it happens. It's like, it feels like magic. But those things, those interests of mine, they often link up in some kind of into some sort of webs of connection, and that makes my practice grow, but also myself grow. And on Saturday, I attended an online talk about art and environment, and the presenter was referring to life as practice as well, and that was a beautiful way for me to connect all the dots. So it's like it's not just the photography is my practice, but life is my practice as well. I'd like to think that I'm practicing kind of conscious living, and in that way, maybe very simplified equation, photography has become my life. Okay, but how did it all start? I'm not going to bore you with the details of my childhood. Okay, I did have as a child various artistic inclinations. I did attend art classes. I always thought that while I was able to do certain things, I didn't have enough talent. I opted for languages, but the art kind of stayed in the background, kind of bubbling away. I obviously took photos, who doesn't, right? We all go on holidays. We like to somehow capture those moments. But I soon noticed, or rather my friends noticed, that my photographs, they often say like, there are no people in your photographs. And there are these other things like lampposts or these battered doors or these kind of paint peeling off the wall. Why is that? And I just shrug my shoulders and, well, that's what appeals to me. What can I say? I needed to make several attempts to actually understand the manual settings. It it worked. After, I don't know, second or third attempt, and what I mean by attempt is actually attending a workshop. And then I started taking photos, and that's kind of a in a more conscious way. And yeah, these are the photos that I took several years ago while in Lisbon on a workshop with a Polish photographer, and we were doing a lot of street photography then, and I just couldn't do it. And I went on on a trip with him twice, and it was always street photography, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. I was unable to photograph people, so I would always sneak away and go into a church, for example, and photograph some sculptures, or I would photograph some other weird things. When he actually said, "Ania, you go and bring me one photograph with a human figure," I brought him a photograph of a mannequin, and that was it. And then when I talked to him, he said, and I said, like, "Oh, and where do you think my future is as a photographer?" And he said, fine art. Street is not for you." And it was great, because I actually agreed, and I think I was kind of forcing myself to do something that was really not up my street. And I was glad that I was glad to hear that from somebody experienced. So these are the photographs from those two workshops with him, and Lisbon and Sicily, and mountains. That's from Scotland. And then, interestingly enough, when I was going through my photos yesterday, this is more related to playing. So that was already, I can't see that slide, 2019, and that was when I got my first kind of a, let's say, more pro camera, which was Fuji X Pro 1. So kind of a basic level still. And it was interesting to notice that by pressing buttons, I got these multiple exposures in my camera, and I was probably not even aware at the time that this is what you call, this is the term that you should be using in relation to those photos. So that's quite interesting. I really completely forgot that at that time I managed to to do that. And then at some point I joined a course here in Glasgow, which was about creative photography. Unfortunately, COVID sort of started towards the end, and the last class we had was very kind of rushed, and that was about moving your camera, but we didn't manage to cover everything. But at least I heard you can move your camera. And when I was in London, I think that was kind of, again, last trip before lockdown was introduced, I was in Tate, and that was the first time I consciously moved my camera. So that's in 2020. And it was when I moved that camera, like, clockwise, it was fascinating. I was fascinated by what I saw, at the back of my camera. And thought, this is interesting. So I then spent some time in those kind of a darker bits of the Tate, if you know the place, because that's where there wasn't much light, so it was it was sort of easier. And I played with soft focus as well, but with different movements. But I still didn't know that it's called intentional camera movement. And that was probably kind of the photos before were the departure. This is maybe arrival. So that's already lockdown was we were in lockdown, but we were still able to leave homes to go for a walk. So in my kind of looking around my house, where are the nearest parks? Okay, so I started going to all the parks that I could get to on foot. And then I discovered that there's a reservoir not far from me. And I started going there on a regular basis. And that was a very interesting experience, because the weather on that particular day was kind of a typically Scottish, so 4 seasons in 1 minute. So there were like blue skies and like blinding sunshine, so not good for photography at all. heavy rain, not good for photography either. So you needed to kind of, so I was a little bit disheartened, and I thought, like, what am I supposed to photograph here? And I could see those beautiful trees, you know, against the kind of a dramatic sea with those clouds moving fast, and the light being reflected in the droplets of the rain. And I could see the birch tree, which is my favorite. And it kind of looked to me like a sort of like a bride with those, you know, branches flowing in the air and the wind. And I kind of wanted to capture that wildness, that passion. And I knew that the kind of a regular image would not do it. And then my then partner showed me what I should do and I should use an ND filter, and what should I do? And that was when the penny dropped. And that was intentional camera movement. Okay, so these are the images. So 3 years ago, my first ICM images, and yeah, I was hooked. And then this is another image taken sometime afterwards. Again, very dramatic weather in Scotland, and again, I was on my own app on a bridge looking over Loch. And again, weather dramatically changing on the horizon with those kind of ominous clouds coming in. And again, I took the photo, and that was when I used the ICM hashtag for the first time. So I actually checked that yesterday on my Instagram. It's amazing that it feels like a very long time, but actually it wasn't a long time ago. And I think and since then I've been using ICM on a regular basis. I still take photos in using other ways, and you will see some of those photos later. But I think what I value in ICM is that it's fluid, it's dynamic, it's expressive, it's dreamy, ambiguous, liminal, which is in between. And that is, again, that's the in-betweenness that I was talking about earlier. And these things just resonate with me so much, not just as a photographer, but also, so not just visually, but also as characteristics of life experiences that I value and that are part of my life. So this brings me to, I just want to talk about one course, which has not much to do with photography. So what I did in autumn 2021, I took a course that was actually delivered by my colleague at the Glasgow School of Art, which is developing your creative practice. And there were all sorts of people doing that course, mostly females, interestingly enough. I mean, all of them were, all of us, and just the facilitator. My colleague is a male, and all the participants were females. Interesting. I always find these things interesting. So there were all sorts of people with different levels of experience, printmakers and painters, and yeah, all sorts of art disciplines. I think I was the only one who did photography. I mean, others were using photography as a method, maybe to document certain things, but not as practice as such. And we spent, I don't know, it was like 10 weeks maybe. And we spent, every Wednesday we would meet online, and we would talk about art and practice and what does it mean, and the values related to practice and the processes, etc. And we had different kinds of little exercises. And one of the first exercises that John, the tutor, asked us to do is to mind map our interests. Okay, and that seems like a very simple exercise. Well, I'm supposed to, like, say cooking and baking, so what? Okay, but once we started mind mapping, and then obviously there would be questions about why, go deeper, but go even deeper. And once you start digging, then certain patterns emerge, and then you go beyond maybe at least this is what happened to us on that course. So I'm not just talking about my own experience here. And you go beyond the surface. So even, it's like, so why is it that I like cooking this? And then it might be because you're interested in culture, in foreign cultures, in other cultures, in how people all over the world cook, Or it might be, you know, you're using certain spices because they're so colorful, and so, you know, so kind of their taste is so different, so fiery, for example. And then you start kind of through associative thinking, you start noticing certain patterns, and you start discovering, and again, this maybe sounds a little bit like cliche, you start discovering your values. And I found that exercise very illuminating, because then, my kind of this is not the first mind map. So that's the kind of like, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth version of my mind map. It's very difficult to organize information on a sheet of paper. So that's the one on the left. And then what I did on the right is I used the tracing paper, and you can see that I didn't have the right size. But anyway, it worked. And tracing paper is very interesting because, of course, it's semi-transparent, so you still see what's beneath, but then you can annotate. And I started mapping my artistic interests, over my life interests. And I started, and this is how I started saying, okay, right, so all these things connect somehow, and what I do in life connects with what I do in photography, and then the other way around. And it allowed me to understand myself a little bit, my position, understand myself as a photographer a little bit. And this is when I started calling myself a photographer or an artist. And this is when I started referring to my photography as practice. And it's a very simple exercise, but I would really recommend, if you are interested maybe in developing your practice or going further, just to understand yourself, where you're coming from, where it is that you are at now, where do you want to be. And another exercise that I can recommend that was only brought to my attention on Saturday, and it might sound a little bit, crazy, but it's actually very interesting, is to see, so during that talk I already mentioned, the speaker said that she often visualizes her practice as a character, as a person. So you can talk to the character. So you ask questions of the practice. And it's, for example, what is it? So addressing your practice, what is it that you want from me? What is it that you want to do? And it's very interesting what answers you get. I asked that question on Saturday evening when I went for a walk in the park, and I heard quite clearly that I want your time. I want a little bit more of your time. I want you to spend time with me. I want your hands to get dirty, with this and that. And that it felt like talking to a friend, and it really surprised me. Okay, so now I'd like to kind of talk a little bit more about the different borders that I kind of was referring to earlier, and that I play with. And I kind of chose 3 areas, and hopefully we've got enough time to cover that. The first one is how I play with image and text. Then is the kind of a borderline between using mobile as a tool to photograph, and a camera, which I will refer to as proper camera. So that's the big camera. And then also I want to talk about the kind of a digital versus physical. And so these are, and I wanted to stress, these are my reflections, my kind of understandings, and I'm open to dialogue, and you might be doing some of these things, you might be doing them slightly differently, and I'll be very interested in hearing from you, whether that resonates with you and how you do these things if you do them. So you know already that I work with language, and I love language and reading. I love lyrical prose. I'm not a great fan of poetry. I think that maybe I haven't grown up yet. I appreciate it, but it's still quite difficult for me to engage with, which is quite interesting because I've got a quote related to that. So maybe poetry is saying something to me. I believe words can be images, and I play metaphors. I love metaphors. I like talking to my students, my Chinese students, about metaphors. I like how certain things are expressed in certain languages and not in others. And I like how students, for example, and I play with English. You know, we are trying to get some meanings across. We don't know the word, and we come up with some strange way phrasing. And sometimes those phrasings, those kind of that are uncommon, not used by native speakers, they're quite interesting, quite revealing. So quite early, I would start using captions for my photos, and some of them were quite simple. So if there's a photo of a tree, then well, it's a tree or a birch or an oak. So they were quite descriptive, basically, referring kind of a word for referring exactly to what was being shown in the image. But every now and again, I would kind of come up with a more associative title that would be kind of maybe funny, or I mean, at least funny to me, playful, kind of introducing an extra layer of meaning, kind of an interpretive potential. So, for example, these two photos are examples, in my opinion, of what I'm talking about. You might completely disagree with that. Would anybody? This is an interactive workshop now. Would anybody like to try to give a caption to any of these images? There's no right or wrong answer here, to be honest, because we obviously, everybody sees different things, and we all have different experiences.
I see faces in both of them, I think.
Yeah, and I like your thinking. And funnily enough, my cat has just shown her face as well. I like your thinking, and this is what I have seen as well. So for me, the image on the left is a kind of a take on the Klimt's kiss. I see two faces kissing, and actually it's a staircase in one of the theatres in Glasgow. But there are two superimposed on each other. And the other one makes me think of another painting by Edvard Munch, Scream.
Yeah.
And the title is Arboreal Scream. It's just the shape of the head. And yeah, and it's a kind of it makes me, when I saw that tree, and the branch that was cut off, it is like a wound, right? And it is, I mean, it has kind of grown over, but it is like an index or a trace of pain, maybe, or of scream in the past. So that's kind of a one way, and I really like when these associations come to my mind, and it's a way of playing for me. Then at some point I started looking for quotes, and thank God that we have an internet, and it's very easy to find quotes, because much as I would love to be able to remember quotes from the books that I have read, I can't. My memory is not very good. But I often go onto the website Goodreads, and I will, let's say, okay, I want a quote about trees. And then, all these quotes come up, and I go through them, and I kind of look, I kind of try to find one that somehow speaks to me, strikes the chord with me. And it's very interesting that through these searches, I have often found literature that then later I read, and it really allowed me to understand something. For example, I was familiar with Hermann Hesse, but I didn't know that he wrote about trees, and discovering that was a kind of was a discovery. I mean, it was a great discovery. It was a moment of truth, because reading that trees can be sanctuaries for us was very comforting. And I used that kind of searching for quotes for different kinds of ideas and images. It would be a way for me to understand something. I often would understand something about myself, about the world, about the others. And thanks to that, I was able to grow as a human. And because my life is so connected to photography, I was able to understand something as a photographer as well. And so there's another quote here, which is related to the sea. There's going to be quite a few quotes now, and I don't think we have time to go through them. But if anybody is interested, then obviously when watching the recording, you can You can stop and read them, or I can collate those quotes for you and send it as a document later. And sometimes those quotes took me in very surprising directions. And this kind of refers back to what I said earlier about poetry, because I took this image of myself, and then I think I was looking for quotes about the throat, right? Because that's what's in the image. And then I found that quote, "Poetry is a way of taking life by the throat." And that was a kind of a suddenly understanding how the language of poetry is so concise, maybe so concise, but so cutting to the core. And I think images can do the same, because there's a lot of parallels between how images and words work. Okay. And another way for me to work with with words and images is to actually use selected texts. So just as a little bit of, and this is what this series, Derive, from autumn 2022 is about. So that was last autumn, and I was going through a kind of a challenging time in my life. And whenever I struggle with something personal, I just go walking. I walk around the city, and it's often very random walks. I just kind of walk and see where the path takes me. And I kind of I hadn't done that for a while, kind of walking around the city. So so I thought, like, okay, so that's a way for me to acquaint myself again in the city, not like beyond my neighborhood. And even if it was around my neighborhood, I would challenge myself to take a path that was not known to me. So even if it's just 100 meters, but I wanted to be in a place that is not familiar to me. So this way I went to places that I think I would have never otherwise gone to. Some weird places as well, like Easter House. I don't know how many, whether you are familiar with Glasgow, but Easter House is not necessarily a place you want to go to, or certain parts at least, and not as a single female. But I ended up there and took these photos of the pylons, which I'm very pleased with. What I used was a pinhole, which again, I made that pinhole myself, and it's a digital pinhole. So basically it's you drill a little hole in a cap on that you put on the body. And then again, if anybody is interested in knowing more about this technique, I'm happy to give information by email, for example. And the images by definition are very blurred, very out of focus. But I also either use a double pinhole, so there's a lot of, so there are like two images superimposed on each other, or I moved the camera a little bit. So that's where the kind of there's a bit of ICM here. They're quite difficult to control. And they're very kind of, to me, they're very raw and very kind of, I know, expressive. I mean, these are a little bit ominous, but it's because of the editing, or maybe it's reflecting my mood at the time as well. What I also used here was the What 3 Words app. I don't know whether, is anybody familiar with that app? Yeah. But for those of you who are not familiar, the app tracks you and gives you, identifies your location and labels your location, your exact location, with 3 words. And those words are pretty random. I'll show you an example. So for example, this image from Glasgow Harbour, the location, the particular location I took the image from is Brief Moon Handy. Okay. So that was a little bit kind of an absurdist. And that resonated with me because the whole idea of walking around and kind of walking in a following that idea of derive, which comes from French. And it was, again, for those of you who are maybe interested in this kind of stuff, it's related to psychogeography. And that was, it was part of the kind of a movement that developed in the 50s, Situationist International. And they were kind of trying to construct situations in which some art could happen. That's a very basic definition. And dérive in French means drifting, but it's not just drifting mindlessly through the city. It's about kind of to me, it's about kind of a drifting, wandering aimlessly without any destination in mind, but you remain alert and aware of your surroundings, and you are open to different kind of effects of the place on you. You know, what attracts you about the place, different affordances or constraints that the place kind of throws at you. And you kind of let go of any expectation. So again, what I was talking earlier, you just go with that intention, opening up to what the walk brings. So using that app and using these random words, that kind of was in tune with the project, or with the method that I was that employed to do the project. And the text that inspired all this was the book Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. And again, I don't know whether you're familiar with it or not. It's a very interesting book from the narrative point of view, and quite imaginative as well. And again, I'm not going to give you a synopsis of the book, but what the book is about in very simple terms is the kind of a boundary work between what is real and what is fiction, what's memory, what's desire, what's the past and what's the present. And this is what I was kind of probably struggling with or thinking about a lot at the time. So I've got these quotes from the book, and then kind of in my own reflection, what it is that I was looking for, maybe, or what it is that I intended, my intentions for these walks, daily walks. I took them daily for several days or weeks, a couple of weeks maybe. And I was trying to let go of certain things. Again, I'm not going to read the quotes, but I'll just kind of flick through these images so that you can see them, and I'll just tell them what they show maybe. So that's the Glasgow Harbour. This is one of the Titan cranes. Interestingly, I was right beneath it, so it's looking up, and that made me think of how often we stick to certain perspectives in life, okay, and how often by simple challenging yourself to look from a different perspective, whether it's up or from down, you see things differently. And that's not only photographically speaking, but also life. I'm sure you have all experienced that. I don't have to say that. Yeah, that's the botanical gardens in Glasgow, Kibble Palace. So that's the double pinhole. That's why you have two of them, and it's about kind of a remembering and forgetting. That's just a tree on a lovely kind of a terraced side of a canal in Glasgow, and and there was this kind of a tree living or growing precariously on the cliff almost. That's a cemetery not far from me. Had never been there before. I love graveyards, probably because of their quietness. And I did that was actually on a very rainy day, but I think the sun came out for a bit at some point. Oh no, that's the one on the rainy day. The previous one was probably taken on another day when it was sunny. So that's the graveyard again. That's the pylon in an Easter house. And there are some reflections on the process of becoming and unbecoming. So this is how and I really like the three words here. So the kind of a melodrama almost of the experience and letting go of the past and thinking of the struggle, and then you get pizza. And it was something just so funny about this, and also me prancing around in grasses when I could see people, dealing drugs, etc., which was not funny, but it was in the middle of the day. I just felt really surreal, the whole thing. But I mean, this is how art is done. And and interestingly enough, once I kind of started working with in a way like this is when projects happen. So in the past I would work with individual images, but ways like this allow me to create whole series and kind of a cohesive series, because there is a theme uniting them all. So I think that's one more. So that's certainly ICM, and that's the same place. Well, the three words are different, but more or less the same place where the picture of the tree was taken. Okay, so moving on, another project was entitled Making Memories, and that's September 2021, and that's in the north of Scotland. And again, we were driving through the landscape that felt very remote. Those of you who have been in Scotland, I'm sure you can you can imagine what it is. That it's not necessarily that you're far from anywhere. You know, might be 20 miles from a village, but it does feel like you're miles and miles away. And it was just this piece of derelict fence on a little kind of a hill, and the hills, mountains beyond that, and clouds coming in, and the weather changing very rapidly. And that was the first kind of a proper holiday after being locked down. So suddenly it's like you are participating in something special. So it's a special experience and you want to live it and be fully present. But then also you're aware how fleeting that experience is, and also that weather is changing so quickly. So obviously you need to photograph this. So when I was pressing the shutter, I was aware that it's the moment I pressed the shutter, that is already a memory, because time goes by so quickly. And at the time I was also processing my personal loss. So it was kind of relating to my father, who died almost a year earlier. And he loved mountains, and that's why I love the mountains as well. So this is what we have in common, and this is what allows me to be close to him, remain close to him, to my dad. I'll just kind of again flick through this. So I was thinking of memories. How do we make memories? How do we choose what, or how is it chosen? It's not that we choose. How is it chosen that we remember certain things and not others? How come that certain that is fragments, and some fragments are clear and other fragments are very blurry? So this is where ICM worked for me and for that particular project. How come that certain things come to the foreground and others stay in the background? And then when you think of it again, let's say 2 weeks later, it doesn't have to be the same. Your perspective might change. So I was kind of applying here the idea of the foreground and background. Felt very strong to me, because how come that particular time moment in time you remember certain things, and then 2 moments later, even if you think of it again, you remember something else, and something else comes to the foreground. And this is how. So this image is quite. So this is a little bit of an aside. So when thinking about that background foreground, I thought, okay, so I can see that mountain here, that line that on the sky, which is multiplied because of the ICM. And then what happens if I do this? So if I turn it upside down, so now what is the mountain, what is the sky? In both images it can be either, right? So here we obviously, the black shape, that's the mountain, and the white shape is the sky. but it could be the other way around. So the sky becomes the mountain, and the mountain becomes the dark sky. And I have used a kind of a process of printing here that uses gold leaf, so that's why you get that kind of a shimmering sort of a gold effect. So again, it just kind of I think what is important to me is telling stories about experiences, human experiences, through the images. So that's what happens. That's what matters to me, and this is where the connection between words and images, gets important, gains value. And then just to kind of because I feel like it has become quite serious. Okay, so just to kind of make it a little bit more playful. Yes, so when I was at Charlie's place, Charlie printed off some images for us, and she said, well, just play with them. And I said, okay, can I have some thread and needle? And I started puncturing the image and scratching and then stitching. I'm not great at stitching. And then I started photographing my my print, and then I photographed it against the light, edited a little bit, and a different reality was born. And again, it gives it's the same image which was born in some, kind of a heavy conditions, weather-wise and psyche-wise, but then it became something playful as well. It became a kind of fertile ground for play and experimentation. And this is what really amazes me about images, that they can end up in places, and you as a maker, you can end up in places that you've never imagined if you just let that happen. How are we doing for time? That's an hour. Talia, I can't hear you.
I'm so used to not being on this side of the things. You're doing great. Just carry on. It's only an hour, so yeah, roll on. It's absolutely captivating. I'm loving it. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. So this next series is called Holding Space, and I just really love more and more. And thank you, Charlie, for allowing me to talk, because I'm realizing, I'm consolidating certain things for myself. So it's super, super useful. So I really love how words come to my mind, and they allow me to create series, whole projects, and they tell stories. And this was taken in my favorite country park, not far from me, in March, just this year, a few months ago. And this was like on a day that you could kind of finally feel like, okay, spring is coming, winter is done. We are done with winter. Obviously, that didn't happen, right? It was still cold in Glasgow for another month or two. But I mean, at least the sun was there, and it was kind of quite bright. And there were these kind of shafts of light going through penetrating the canopy of pine trees. I mean, other trees were still bare. And I just felt so close to the trees. And again, it's this kind of, I know, it's very spiritual to me, but it's like communing with nature almost. It's like, giving them, the trees, my attention, but also the trees giving attention to me, and kind of validating my experience, and, holding the safe space where I can be at my best, which is the playful, open, kind of not inhibited by anything, by the norms or the expectations of the society, that you should work and you should do this and you should do that and you should do it this way. I'm myself, and they are validating that experience, and they are holding that safe space for me where I can be really myself. And I think, and that was when I decided to do in-camera exposures, multiple exposures, and I decided that I wanted to do ICM as well. So that's a lot of kind of playing around and not knowing what will come out. And I'm rather pleased how they turned out, because there is something very painterly about this and very ambiguous about the shapes. So I feel like you can recognize straight away that these are trees. but it just delights how it's infused among the branches, and how the double exposure kind of disrupts and distorts the shapes. It just feels so soft. And I love the softness. That kind of, there's like to me, there's a sense of feel of watercolor almost. And maybe that is the frustrated watercolor artist in me, that I never was able so far, at least, to master that technique, not even like do anything with it, because it's just so difficult to control. So a few images from that series, Holding Space. Okay, and another series, and again, this is all, it's all about words. So one of these images will be might be familiar to you, because I posted it as a response to one of the challenges, the first one, I think. So this is a mini series, just 4 images, and that was inspired by my exploration of anger, and as a kind of a potentially constructive emotion. And how did it start? Okay, because it started with an image. So I went for a walk in the park, in the same park as the Holding Space series. I went for a walk. It says it's February, but actually I think it was earlier. It must have been like the end of January. Maybe it was in February that I processed the photos. And it was quite dark, getting dark very quickly. So you soon ran out of things to photograph anyway, because it's just dark. And then I was leaving the park. I was very cold, probably hungry, and I don't know, maybe kind of not necessarily relieved in any way by the walk. So it didn't kind of bring that comfort that maybe I had expected. And then I was getting close to the gate. It was completely dark. I mean, just like dark shapes of the trees against the dark sky, and that was it. And then I was walking along the exit road, and a car passed. So I stopped, so that the car, because I was walking on the road, so I stopped and stepped aside, so in order to stay safe. And the car went past, and I just waiting for the car to pass. I turned around, and then suddenly, because the car stopped as well, and the rear lights were on and just illuminated those trees, and the trees suddenly become red, like blazing red. And I was like, oh. And it was like, instantly you forget about your hunger, feeling cold, whatever. You stand in a cold field and you just wait for those cars to go past again. And there were not many people, there were not many cars in the park. It was just basically other people, probably whoever is employed in a cafe, maybe leaving. And I then thought, like, I can see red. Like, this red was such a powerful color for me. And then obviously, like, instantly, all right, see red in English, anger. So I was standing there, and it's like, you get excited when you take photos and you feel like you are onto something. So you get excited, but it was this second at the back of my head, it's like, oh, red, anger, and how do I feel about anger? And then when I on the way back home, I started thinking more about it, and how, I suppressed anger for most of my life. I was raised to be a good girl, that pleases everybody, listens to instructions, follows instructions, and I'm an introvert. So like, actually, being quiet suits me. It's comfortable, right? I don't. I mean, I'm okay to be quiet. So I never questioned that. But of course, sometimes it's okay, but there are many occasions when it's not okay, that you should actually stand up for yourself and speak up for yourself. And I always had problems with anger. I suppressed it. I kind of channeled sadness. Sometimes I was not able to control it. So then I would maybe be unpleasant to others. Then I would feel guilty, and I allowed my boundaries to be crossed. So I started maybe also being at midlife. You start thinking about these kind of things. And those images allowed me to kind of sit with those thoughts and kind of process them. And, and then how do you accept, how do you sit with anger? How do you use it in the right way so that it's constructive rather than destructive? And And it was a beautiful exercise because I needed to be patient, you know, when waiting for those cars to pass to see red. Okay. And I saw red a few times, and I took those images, and it was just a metaphor for how I, you know, I can engage with anger in constructive ways. So this is how words, or certain, you know, it started with images, but the words came the words came while I was actually taking those photos, and that added that meaning, that extra meaning to me, especially when creating that series. And that's I think that's the last one from that series. Okay, so that's the kind of a text and image, and I must say that when starting, and again, Charlie, you were quite instrumental when suggesting, you know, last time we saw each other, that I start working with words, adding more words, and I have become braver, because I started adding stories like this that they're quite personal, right, to my Instagram posts, and I started journaling as well, and I just like, there's something about the using your body to photograph, but also using your body when writing, and how you kind of put the pen to paper, and your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations kind of take shape, quite literally, and metaphorically speaking. So this is what photography, in combination with writing, kind of have allowed me to do. The next bit I want to talk about is about it's to do with using your mobile phone. So the photos of the red trees, that was taken with the phone as well. And I kind of I think for some time I had a kind of a internal debate whether, you know, I use an iPhone, whether a smartphone is a kind of a valid tool, photography tool. And I always thought, oh, this is just like a sketchbook, you know, visual notebook, whatever. But these are not kind of a serious artworks, photographs. So, but then again, having chatted about it also with you, Charlie, once during the critique, we talked about this, but also with my colleagues at the art school. And interestingly enough, I just heard two of them talking about this today in a meeting that we had, because they were talking about, I feel there's a parallel here, or similarity to how drawing is seen, like in painting. It's like prep for paintings, right? So these quick sketches, it's part of the process, not the outcome. And my colleague was saying that, and he's a fine artist and you know, painted most of his life, but now he's doing series of drawings, and they're quite elaborate. And he says that they're taking me hours. And he said how he reflected on how it's kind of changed his view of what the drawing can do. That it's not necessarily just part of the process, can be an outcome in itself. And it has kind of made him think about the value, also financial value, right? I mean, how do you value a drawing that perhaps, you know, some of those drawings take, you know, just seconds to make. So there's an interesting question of value also in terms of money, but that's a different story in this case. So, but having participated in those conversations, I kind of understood that, well, it's a tool, right? It's a tool out there, and it allows me to take photographs, to make images. It's convenient, it's good, it's portable, and I kind of I have stopped considering as something inferior to my proper camera, okay, my big camera, and it's no longer a kind of a, you know, poor cousin in the family of the cameras on my shelf, but it's the member of the family. And so this relationship is changing, has changed. And so I kind of want to celebrate that and show you a couple of other series One is called Personal Archaeology, and these are mostly photos taken in my when I go for bike rides around my parents' house. And the other one is wintering. So the personal archaeology. So obviously I'm on a bike. I don't have space, you know, in my tight jacket to put a proper camera in, but there's enough space to put a phone in. And I go through that landscape, which is changing. So I moved into that house where my parents now, my mom lives, when I was 18. So I don't even consider that to be my home because I was too old. But I still have my room there, interestingly enough. It's like, and whenever I go, there's like going back to a time capsule, you know, it's like discovering all that stuff that you maybe bought or were interested as a teenager or a younger person. And I often discover books, for example, that I completely forgot that I had. And it's the same refers to the landscape. The landscape changes over the last 20 plus years. The landscape has changed. It's a very uninspiring landscape because it's flat. No hints here at the Dutch landscape, right? It's very flat and it's farmland. It's mostly corn growing there, but there are like more and more houses. Like I used to ride on dirt tracks there. Now you've got, you know, paved roads, and it's becoming, you know, more kind of an opulent with those kind of a fancy houses, etc. But every now and again you see something, you know, like a kind of a little shed somewhere, or there is a dirt track left, or, you know, these kind of remnants of the past. And it does feel like kind of excavating your past a little bit. So that's why it's called personal archaeology. And because I go riding, cycling either in the morning or in the evening, hence the golden light, because it's sunset or sunrise. And then the wintering series is from winter this year, and again during that time I kind of felt a little bit uninspired at the beginning, especially of winter, and I just kind of decided that okay, I'll just take it easy. And then I checked my Instagram, and actually on the 21st of December I wrote something that looks like a little poem. And I'm just going to read that for you. So I wrote, midwinter, I've gone deep, deep, deep to the bottom and beyond, where the roots are, where all those years ago I began, to begin anew. And this is what I did over the next few days. I walked to the park, the same park, it's always the same park. And I just took, whenever I felt like, whenever the landscape spoke to me, I just took a photograph. And that kind of it gave me an opportunity to think of winter, you know, kind of a time to slow down, to nourish, to reflect. So now the question to ask you, what nourishes you? You know, and like for me, for example, my practice nourishes me. So so it's like, okay, so how do I nourish myself during winter? Well, I go for those walks and I observe. And if anything speaks to me, I'll make an image. And the title of the series refers to the book by Catherine May, Wintering. And if you haven't read it, I recommend it. And there's a little quote there, which I would like to kind of read out for you. So it says, plants and animals don't fight the winter. I'm really sorry that I speak about winter in the middle of summer. Anyway, the day is already 2 minutes shorter, at least in Glasgow. Right, so plants and animals don't fight the winter. They don't pretend it's not happening and attempt to carry on living the same lives that they lived in the summer. They prepare, they adapt, they perform extraordinary act of metamorphosis to get them through. Winter is a time of withdrawing from the world, maximizing scant resources, carrying out acts of brutal efficiency and vanishing from sight. But that's where transformation occurs. Winter is not the death of the life cycle, but its crucible. And that just really spoke to me. And there is something about seasons and seasonality that I feel we have kind of a lost touch with as humanity or society. And this is something that I'm trying to kind of get myself reacquainted with and live more seasonally. So a couple of more images. Okay, so this is maybe an interesting part as well. So what I've decided to do is to show you before and after, tell you a little bit about my workflow. So it's not all about kind of a, pseudo-psychological reflections, but actually some practical advice as well. So I've got my little workflow. I don't know whether it's I'm sure people do it in a completely different ways. There are millions of ways of doing that. But when I take a photo with my phone, I do the first edit in using Pixel. So that's the first icon. I often take photos with slow shutter. I should have included that here as well. And then Pixel allows me to kind of do some kind of a color changes maybe, and often I do the double exposure in the app because it allows you to mask things out. So you've got better control than with Snapseed. Then when I'm happy with that image, I take it to Distressed. I think it's called Distressed FX. You need to pay for that app, but I think it costs around 5 quid or 6 quid, and it's the best 6 quid I've spent in my life. Really worth 2 cups of coffee or whatever. This is where you've got like myriads of textures. And it's just playing with textures, again, something that I'm interested in sense of building that kind of a sensory tactile experience maybe. And it just kind of the way it adds to your image, or not, sometimes it doesn't, just almost kind of like adds noise to the image. But it's something that I like playing around, and that has kind of put me on a path or road that now I started creating my own textures in different ways, and I start adding them to the images that I process in Lightroom, so the ones from the proper camera. And then Snapseed, which is for kind of another round of editing and just kind of maybe selectively lightening, making certain parts darker or lighter, more sharper or a bit blurry, etc. Okay, so here are 2 images, both of them taken just like 2 or 1 month ago. The one on the left is taken at Tate in London, and it's an image at one of the staircases, and some people's names are listed on these kind of colorful strips. And the other image was taken at a gig here in one of the clubs in Glasgow, in a basement, no light, lots of people, good music, but quite difficult to photograph, especially when you stand at the back, right? But I just thought, okay, I don't photograph things like this. But I think what I did was like, I just want to have something, to remember that I've been to that gig. Okay, so first of all, that staircase. So the first image is the one taken with slow shutter. I kind of rotated it a little bit and changed the colors. That's the second image, and the one on the left, on the right, sorry, that's with added textures and probably further editing and in Snapseed. And you might ask, but why the texture? Why do you need it? It doesn't add anything. Well, it doesn't, but it does. Because actually, the reason why I was at Tate was to see an exhibition by Magdalena Bakanovic, who's a sculptor, but also she worked extensively with textiles. And she created this beautiful sculptural kind of a textile installations. They are massive and they are very organic, and they feel like kind of alien bodies hanging, and they're very kind of, you just want to go into that textile and engage with it. Unfortunately, it's not allowed, and it's very kind of abstracted. So I also saw another exhibition which is mentioned here in that little description, but this one in particular refers to the work of Bakanovic, and I bought a book about Bakanovic, and she said, I'm interested in the feeling when confronted by the woven object, and this is what I'm interested in as well. I'm interested in those feelings, and the feeling that I want to convey here is the feeling I got from those installations, from those textile installations. That's why the texture has become so important. So what I wanted to express through this image is expressing the felt sense. which the previous versions do not allow. So that's the reasoning. Now with the gig, when I took the regular photo, I thought, oh, I'll just see what slow shutter can do. So that was purely for fun. So I took some random image with a slow shutter, another random image, and then, you know, sitting on the sofa and trying to kill time, you just start messing around. And, you know, I superimposed the black image on the purple image, or the other way around. I thought, okay, this looks interesting. Added some textures, and here's the image, which is about kind of the music exploding and filling you up, because it was such a small venue, and the sound system was not. I think it was like the sound was really filling up the space and you, and it was quite rhythmic music, and it was impossible to stand still. You just kind of want to. You just need to dance. You just need to move to the rhythm of the music, and again, that's what the image represents. Right. Do we still have time for this, or is that another talk?
It depends on how much more there is to go. But I think you're good. I mean, like, I'm sure nearly everybody's still here. Nobody, I think we've lost one person, and that's it. So, you know, we'll carry on, and if people want to leave, they can catch up with the recording later. If you're happy to keep going, Ania, I'm quite happy to keep listening.
There are not many left. These are my experiments, and these are just kind of the images that you're going to see now. That's kind of working between and beyond photography and ICM. So actually there's not much ICM work here, and I have chosen different images to show you different techniques that I use in order to kind of play around with the digital and with the physical. So what you can see in the photos is the mess in my house when I do some of these things. Okay, so you can see, yeah, it's not particularly. I do clean up later. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I sometimes do in order to go beyond the digital. So yeah, I've been talking about adding textures and you know, and kind of adding like another layer to the images. But what I'm kind of increasingly doing is taking the images to into the physical realm. And what do I do? Well, I print some. Okay, so this is an image of a tree, an ICM image. I printed that on a copy paper, so photocopy paper, cheap. Okay. Then this is very liberating. Then you pour some turpentine onto it, and you basically put gloves on, and you start scrunching it up. It's very liberating. It makes a lot of noise, and it's very tactile. And then you kind of straighten it a little bit and rephotograph. And then you kind of add a different layer to it. Okay. And then you can distress it a bit more, and you can photograph it again. So it's about rephotographing, and you can play with it like for hours, because every act of scrunching does something different. When you add a little bit more water or liquid to it, then it starts disintegrating. You can cover it with cling film, for example. It's add an extra layer. If you have a kind of a color bulb that changes color, then you can illuminate it from different directions: pink, purple, green, whatever. And again, it changes. It's like a shapeshifter. It's just such a and time just go past. So if you decide to do it, be prepared. That's your afternoon gone. But great, great fun, really great. Here's another image, again, straight image of Loch Lomond. Again, I printed it on a kind of a, let's say, photo paper. So slightly more expensive, but not the most expensive one. And then I tore it. I tore it to bits, strips. Okay. And then I had another, the same image, and then basically rearrange those bits. So it's like making a collage, right? So that's why you've got these kind of torn edges along the shapes of the trees, and then you lie those shapes on the photograph again, and you recreate the image, and you rephotograph, and then you edit it. You can add again color if you use different light a red light or pink light, you can easily add color to it. Okay, this is similar. This is a photograph of a birch tree, which again I printed on photographic paper. I tore it into 4 strips, yeah, very kind of a straight. And then I had 4 glasses, like, you know, for Coca-Cola, soft drink, whatever. I put those strips into the glasses. I rearranged the glasses so that there's a little bit of distortion going on, and then you start photographing. Again, so much fun. And you know, and you can then experiment with different wine glasses. I know that Charlie has already played around with various bottles, but I mean, this is the kind of the nicest moments when you can play around at home as well, as in nature. This is again 2 photographs, but put into 2 different vases. So that's why you've got this kind of a corrugated lines in the vase on the right, and then I merged the photos in the Lightroom or Photoshop probably. Okay, next one. This is actually a digital image. So what I do, I've got an old iPad. I display the image on the iPad, put it on the table, then I've got a pane of glass, which is from basically a frame that I bought in IKEA. The tape is for safety so that you don't get your fingers cut. And then basically you put the iPad on the table, and then you prop the glass over it, and then you photograph through the glass. And what you do with the glass, you put oil on it, so there are droplets of oil, so that creates the distortion. You can put glycerin as well. Glycerin works quite well because oil sometimes is just too liquidy. So that's the oil. So that's another one, a passage in some building in Oman that I added oil, and then I thought it's a little bit empty. So then I basically transported myself. So that's the figure from the other photo that you saw earlier. So it kind of, I think, makes it a little bit more interesting. And then another image. So that's the same technique, but here it's not only oil, but also inks, alcoholic inks added to the glass. And again, it's like, you know, you add droplets, different colors, and you start messing around, revealing, you know, obviously you get your hands dirty, but you can do it with a cotton wool, for example, and you move the liquids around, revealing the photo underneath parts of it. Or you can just photograph, you know, the layers here without the iPad, and then, well, do the same in the, you know, in Photoshop, just layering the photos, right, with the textures. The next one. So you can probably see that this glass is quite dirty, right? It's dirty because I put a layer of Vaseline on it, and then I photograph with Vaseline. So this is what you get. So obviously, depending on how you shape the Vaseline with your finger or a brush or whatever, you create a layer that is kind of a, you know, almost like custom made for your image. So you get the ridges of the Vaseline in the places that you want. Great fun and good for your hands because obviously the Vaseline is good for skin. Okay, and one bit more. Okay, so that's an ICM self-portrait, and I've done various things to it, and I'll just kind of show you what I have done. So this is the portrait out of my phone, obviously with some processing. Here I added some oil or water, probably then sprinkled some sugar over it. But this is the, you know, the image is not touched. It's you do it on the glass. So you can still use that print later. This is what I'm saying. So you're not wasting, you know. Okay, here painted over. Again, I'm painting on the glass and the image is underneath. You can also paint on the image, right? So that's okay. But just on the glass, it gives you more options, because if you get things wrong, then it's easier to remove it rather than print another image and paint on it. This is actually I think because I did that a while ago. What happened here is actually I created a texture, painted texture on the glass. I photographed it and then I merged them in Photoshop. But just suddenly the photograph becomes like painting. Other things you can do, just a couple more. You can also use tinfoil. And what happens is that you scrunch the tinfoil a little bit, then you kind of straighten it out and paint with black or dark paint. I think that's the order in which you do it. And then you photograph that, and then you layer it with in Photoshop, of course. You layer it with your images. So again, it kind of can add an interesting effect. And just to close the series, and so that because now you've been looking at I don't know, 6 or 5 self-portraits of me, and I don't want you to think that I've got some sort of a self-inflated ego. I don't take it too seriously. I also play around with it. So here I just took pieces of glass that I happen to have, and I just added a little kind of a Venetian type of a mask. And like these rays around me. So again, just adding bits and pieces that you have around you in your kitchen, glass, things that you can photograph through, which creates sort of distortions that create a certain feel. I'm not saying that it will work for all the images, but it's worth playing, and especially if you want to do something fun, I would really recommend that. But I do warn you that time goes by very quickly. And to finish, so looking ahead, this is a series that I'm kind of working on right now. The working title is Day and Night. I am going to probably exhibit it in London in autumn. And these are images, ICM images that I combined with my own textures in Photoshop. I have used 2 different edits, silver and blue. And this is to kind of to show, I mean, they're quite complementary, quite opposite, but they somehow complement each other. And it's the reason I'm using this is to as a metaphor again. It's like it's something to do with weaving a story about supposedly contradictory elements which actually complement each other, and both of them are needed for a kind of a union and completion. And with these images, I'm going to leave you with these images, and and I hope that you spend some time reflecting on your practice and what matters to you as a photographer, and what it is that you want to convey in your photographs, and what they mean to you. And interestingly enough, these images were taken in exactly the same way as that first ICM image, so by the reservoir not far from me. So it's like 3 years, and I've kind of gone there full circle. So these are the images. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wowee, that was absolutely amazing, Ania. And I don't know about anybody reflecting. I think they're all just going out playing, actually. I think that's probably what you've left
Well,
to
I'm glad, because I think that is something that I hold very close to my heart, and I think there should be time for play. Yeah. And it's difficult because we all have commitments, and obviously, commitments, and we are adults living in a serious world, but yeah, the child is still within us.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. I'm just trying to get everybody back on the one screen if I can do that. I'm not sure how to do that now, so I can see everybody. How do I do that? View. There you go, gallery. Brilliant. I can see everybody. Honestly, Ania, that was absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that you didn't miss any bits out. I think we'd have been absolutely gutted if we'd missed the how-to bits at the end and how you came from your playing. And when you first came to do this, we first talked about this, you know, I knew it would be inspiring, but the way you approached it was really, really lovely. And it's really, really, you know, you haven't told us how to do it, but you've told us how to do it, if that makes sense. I think so often there's a piece missing. And for me, probably I just don't spend enough time reading, and I don't spend enough time thinking about why I'm doing things and things like that. And I think if somebody was to ask, you know, how do you create these images that win, you know, the challenge every time, or how do you put this emotion, you just have to have listened to everything you've just said, and that is what comes out with your images. And it's not something that you're specifically saying, this is how I do this. It's the whole experience that you are bringing to the image, and that comes through basically because you are so immersed in it and thinking about it, and you know, coming from so deep. So, you know, it's kind of answered my question as well, you know, how you get there, because I think it's really fascinating. It's not just you know, you do this and this happens.
And I mean, like when I was thinking of what to say, I kind of, everybody has different interests, right? So, you know, I can, telling how you did the images might not necessarily work for everybody, because we might be interested, you know, like somebody here might be interested in photographing birds, let's say, or people, right? And that's fine. And I'm not able to tell you how to photograph people because I don't really photograph them. But I think the kind of you know, why is it that you photograph, or how you photograph, that reflecting on your practice, I think that's important. And this is what we share, all of us, no matter what we photograph, whether it's people, flowers, or trees, or animals, or, you know, still lives, or abstracts, you know. I think it's important, if you want, I mean, like I feel that if you want to go deeper in your practice, then it's important to start asking yourself questions, why and how. So that it starts coming, and I do feel very strongly about this being connected to your values, internal values in some way. And then I think that's when you kind of start joining those dots. I'm at the beginning of my journey, then I feel like it then starts coming from your heart rather than, you know, kind of a technical exercise. I don't want to diminish. I mean, I think it's good to know techniques, and good to know, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that way of photographing. But I feel very strongly about asking yourself how and why.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if anybody's ever stuck in a rut, or anybody's ever wondering how to or what to do next, and ever questioning, the best place is to say to yourself, what do I love? What do I enjoy photographing? And start from there. And that's always a great starting point, because you will immediately come from the heart. You won't come from the head, basically.
Yeah,
and if you do that, that will start appearing in your photos, and you will find something, you know, that it does just take you in one direction, like you say, down a rabbit hole or wherever. Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. Now, I had a couple of questions that came in, and if I've missed anybody's questions, you can butt in and ask. The first one was about the distressed FX. Carol said there's a basic and there's a plus version. Which one do you use?
Oh, I don't. Let me check.
If you know.
Plus.
Plus,
No.
right, okay. That's cool. And you said, is there a desktop version? Do you know? Can you use that?
I've never used it on this, but I've never actually checked. Okay. I just kind of find these apps that's like on my phone, and that's how I use them. Yeah. I am thinking of upgrading my iPad, because there's something I don't know, there's something very tactile about actually doing this on the screen with my fingers, and I quite like that. It seems more like kind of a hands-on than you know, using the graphic tablet or mouse on a laptop. So I would like to, but of course with your finger and on a small phone, on a small screen like this, you cannot be precise, or as precise as you could be. So I'm thinking that like from the technology or the equipment point of view, that an iPad with the stylus would be a good investment.
Yeah. I was just looking at a question. What was the paper you used when you first did your first turpentine activity?
Just photocopy, just a
photocopy.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm not. I think actually, photo paper is thicker, so it's even more difficult to scrunch.
Okay,
I mean, I
okay, so it's easier to do it. Yeah,
that's
cool.
So yeah, just basic photocopy paper.
That's cool. Somebody said, what sort of lighting do you use for your rephotographing?
That's a very good question. So, well, depending on the weather in Glasgow, usually natural. So I try to do it in during the day, so what I have a little kind of a what do you call them, desk lamp, and I have bought this bulb that changes color, and actually is you've got an app and you can choose the color and the luminosity and the saturation and everything on the phone, so you can adjust it. And then I try to use that lamp to kind of just create this like enhance certain creative effects, but other than that it's just natural light. Sometimes I use the light pad, or I should have mentioned that. So so I've got, is that what's called, light pad? Yeah. So I put the image so it's lit, it's backlit basically, and then so certain things come through better, and then I sometimes add the colorful bulb just to add a creative effect.
And just I do photographing artwork, and sometimes, and if you put anything that's remotely shiny, if you're doing ICMing or anything, then it's really great if the sun's shining on it, because then you get the light trails and stuff like that, which if the light's flat then you don't. So if you go outside and play with the I go and photograph outside sometimes, and sometimes I do it by natural light. It's all kind of different sort of. Yeah,
and sometimes you don't want these reflections because I guess if you're not doing ICM, then probably you don't want the reflections. But even with ICM, you don't necessarily want them all the time. But it's all kind of for me, it's part of the creative process, just experimentation. And I kind of was like, so what is it that I want to achieve here? For example, what is it that is kind of coming out of the image that speaks to me? What sort of a mood, for example? And then I make decisions, and obviously you take several takes from different angles. It's very interesting when you rephotograph, especially from different angles as well, because that may distort the image further, and some of these distortions might be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Oh, and I think the last one was what was the first liquid that you used in your first example of glass? Was it just an oil?
Oh, glycerin. You can use oil as well, but I must say that for me, I don't remember which oil. I think I kind of maybe rapeseed oil. I used that first, and it was too liquidy. So basically, it's sort of like it didn't create these nicely formed puddles. It just
just spread.
Yeah. Whereas glycerin is a bit heavier. And it kind of creates the puddles, and they stay for a bit. And I find that much better too.
Yeah. And then you add sugar, you add coffee, then you have add some ice cream, whatever you want, you can add it on top. I'm just like, oh my goodness me, there's just like a whole project going on here. That's just. But I mean,
adding sugar or salt as well. Not necessarily together, but you can try that as well. Different kinds of salt as well. Like now you get these. Like mixed kinds of like herbal, smoky salt, whatever. They will have like different colors in it, and that creates interesting effects as well. You kind of need to be careful how. I mean, again, not every image works with that. Some work better than others, and it's also about how thick the layer is, and I feel like it's better to have a thicker layer so that it kind of covers the image, and then you remove some, or you kind of by shaking very delicately and gently, you kind of thin the layer in some place. So for example, the face, or like half the face, reveals itself. So it's kind of so you see that it's let's say a portrait, but it's not apparent. You kind of need to look a bit harder.
Like having a physical Photoshop.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I'll just mask off this bit and I'll mask off that bit. Oh, I need to put some back again.
it's a lot of it's a lot of fun. It's a bit messy as well. I don't recommend doing that when you have a curious cat walking around. But
that can add a whole new thing to it. Has anybody else got any questions that I haven't asked that you have or would like to put forward?
I missed 5 minutes because my battery wore down at the lake, and I had to get on my bicycle with my ukulele and my phone and my iPad and bicycle back up where I have power. That was absolutely marvelous.
thank you.
I think my comment would be thank you for the depth of the process and your thinking around your photographs. I think often that's what's missing. Often there's just an image, but there isn't any relation to the creation or the foundation of that image with respect to the artist's voice. And I think a lot of times we miss the artist's voice, and we just have an image. And I think your images have a deepened and very well thought out conscious voice. So it was good. It was just refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It was, really, really wonderful. I've made so many notes. There were so many things that you said that was really, really fascinating. There was something I wrote down. The moment you press the shutter, it's already a memory. That is very, very deep, isn't it? But it's so true. And I think, that just thinking about that could well. And the whole trees thing, I must go and find that the quotes idea that you've got for that. So loads. So if everybody doesn't start a new photo project tomorrow, and we all see everybody going in different directions, it will be amazing. Ania, it has been an absolute delight. You have delivered way beyond any expectations. Everything was just wonderful, and I will try and figure out how to save the chat comments so that you can see all the lovely comments that everybody's made below.
Be able to save that.
Can you see that?
Comments?
Yeah, you can save it. I don't do it often enough, so if you can get in and figure out how to save it, then do.
No,
I won't get rid of it. I won't close it down until we've figured out how to save it. So we can figure that out. But it's been an absolute joy. So I feel there may well be a follow-up at some point, but we shall wait and see what that can possibly take. Possibly an Ania and Charlie workshop, maybe. But I'll come to Scotland for that. You don't have to come to Holland. Give me an excuse. So
thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and everybody for listening and being so understanding, because when I was I said it was quite emotional to put it together, to be honest, and quite a journey for me as well. And choosing the images and choosing the stories, and like kind of what is likely to resonate with people. And I know that I sometimes go on this journey, like mentally, all these kind of streams of consciousness, associations, etc. I'm like, not everybody has to be interested in that. So I really appreciate your appreciation, and thank you again for being so accepting and so willing to listen. It means a lot, really means a lot. It's amazing, actually.
Super. Well, I'm so delighted. Why doesn't everybody unmute and give that whole cliche clap? Because if we were all there at a camera club, you have to unmute, otherwise you won't be able to see you. But it's like everybody can give Ania a clap because she deserves it. So when you're teaching, nobody gives you feed, nobody claps you at your sort of presentation. So you should have that back. So brilliant. Super. Well, thank you very much, guys. I'm just going to stay with Ania and try and figure out how we save the chat so we can have that. But we will see you all again sometime soon.
One thing more, that if anybody has questions, then feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, maybe. I can also give my email address but I check Facebook. So if anybody has questions, I'm not going to promise that I know the answers, because as I said, I often just press the buttons and kind of work quite intuitively, I think. But if I can, I will answer, or if you need more details about anything. So just send me a message.
Super.
On Facebook.
Thank you.
Great. Super. Everybody, don't forget to do your 2 second or more seconds challenges for your ICM. You still have 1 week left, I think, to get them in. No excuse not to have a play now and get very creative. So super. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, guys. We will see you all again soon. All right.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye.
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 Bye. Stop.